Well, hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me on this new episode of Reading Michael Jackson. I am your host, Lena, and I'm so happy that you have decided to tune in today and listen to a continuation of what we started in the first episode, which is a reading of Michael Jackson's book of poems and reflections, Dancing the Dream. In the previous episode, we went over really my inspiration, I guess, for why I wanted to do this project. And we also read the title poem of the book, Dancing the Dream. So how this is going to go is I'm going to read the next poem in the book and just briefly discuss it with you. Once again, my goal is not to highlight my own interpretation or reaction to the poem, but rather offer something from me, a huge Michael Jackson fan, to you, the other Michael Jackson fans that might be tuning in to this particular podcast. So we will be continuing today with the second poem in the book. What's interesting about this particular poem is that it comes before what is titled as part 1. So this is kind of a preface poem right along with Dancing the Dream. I find that kind of interesting given the poem that it is. So this poem may be familiar to a lot of Michael Jackson fans, even if you haven't spent a lot of time with the book Dancing the Dream. This poem is called Planet Earth, and Michael actually has a recording of himself reading this, which is, of course, infinitely better than anything I will do today with you. Listening to this poem in his own voice, of course, much better. So I encourage you, if you have not listened to his poem or him reading this poem, go listen to it. It is on YouTube. It is beautiful. He's a beautiful reader, and it's always special to hear work read in the author's own voice. But for now, I am going to read Planet Earth and share some thoughts on it with you. So with that said, let's read together Planet Earth. Planet Earth. Planet Earth, my home, my place, a capricious anomaly in the sea of space. Planet Earth, are you just floating by, a cloud of dust, a minor globe about to bust, a piece of metal bound to rust, a speck of matter in a mindless void, a lonely spaceship, a large asteroid. Cold as a rock without a hue, held together with a bit of glue. Something tells me this isn't true. You are my sweetheart, soft and blue. Do you care? Have you a part in the deepest emotions of my own heart? Tender with breezes, caressing and whole, alive with music, haunting my soul. In my veins I've felt the mystery of corridors of time, books of history, life songs of ages throbbing in my blood, have danced the rhythm of the tide and the flood. Your rusty clouds, your electric storm, were turbulent tempests in my own form. I've licked the salt, the bitter, the sweet, of every encounter of passion, of heat, your riotous color, your fragrance, your taste, have thrilled my senses beyond all haste. In your beauty I've known the how of timeless bliss, the moment of now. Planet Earth, are you just floating by, a cloud of dust, a minor globe about to bust, a piece of metal bound to rust, a speck of matter in a mindless void, a lonely spaceship, a large asteroid. Cold as a rock without a hue, held together with a bit of glue. Something tells me this isn't true. You are my sweetheart, gentle and blue. Do you care? Have you a part in the deepest emotions of my own heart? Tender with breezes, caressing and whole, alive with music, haunting my soul. Planet Earth, gentle and blue, with all my heart, I love you. So Planet Earth is, to me, an interesting piece. As fans of Michael Jackson, we are familiar with his great love of and concern for the world, both the social world of people and humanity, and also the natural world of the environment, of the ecology, of animals. He was a very aware person who expressed obviously a great concern for the world in his music. I think Earth Song is an immediate example of some evidence in his artistry for how close he felt to nature, as well as the responsibility he felt for it as a member of the human race, as a person with a voice, as a sensitive soul, kind of navigating an insensitive life. This poem to me is a little different though. To me, this poem represents the kind of existential concern and curiosity inside of him that so many of us share. Who among us hasn't at some point stared up into the sky, especially at night, when the stars are out and you can see the moon and everything is shining, and there's this sense of wonder, and with that, fear, because there is no answer as humans. There is no end that we're aware of. There is no direct proof of anything that we may or may not believe in. That's the whole definition of faith, to believe in something due to your boundless belief, not due to registered, scientific fact necessarily. And I think there's something to be said for someone like Michael, who is and was a very spiritual person, often a very religious person, someone who appeared so driven by his beliefs. It's interesting to see a piece in which he's expressing that same sort of existential uncertainty so many of us have when it comes to what are we doing here? If you're familiar with Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot, I think this kind of, I don't want to say it echoes that sentiment, but I think there is some connection there between the kind of vastness of not only the earth, but the fact that it is a very small part of a much wider universe we don't really know all that much about as people. It's a very humbling feeling. I find it really sweet and kind of beautiful the way he expresses a love for planet Earth when he says, "You are my sweetheart, soft and blue. Do you care? Have you a part in the deepest emotions of my own heart? Tender with breezes caressing and whole, alive with music haunting my soul." I'm always curious when I read this or hear this poem, who he is asking, do you care? Have you a part? I mean, you can say the entire poem is directed to planet Earth, but really, I'm not sure that's who he's asking here. Perhaps. I'm not sure. I don't know. I have my own theories. But when he talks about alive with music haunting my soul, it kind of reminds me of how I've heard him describe in interviews this kind of relationship to the world around him as being filled with music, and the tapestry of sounds around him, you know, the birds, the breeze, all those things, being a kind of music that he is surrounded by and pulling from at all times. I've also heard other people who knew him describing his ability to hear things that others didn't really hear or notice, both with regular music, but also just in life, just hearing the birds in a different way than other people around him. And you can see how if a person has that kind of sensitivity to the world around them, they would feel a real concern for the world. When you are able to see something really clearly, you're much more inclined to care, and protect it. I mean, we feel the most sense of loyalty to those people we know personally, and if he feels he has this, or he felt this kind of personal relationship to the world, I can see that sense of loyalty to the world also. But then there's that doubt, and he asks, planet Earth, are you just floating by, a cloud of dust, a minor globe about to bust, a piece of metal bound to rust? Like, are we all just part of a time bomb, a ticking clock? Does even the most secure thing about existence, which is the very fact of planet Earth, is even that not reliable in some way? That question as an opening to this book is really interesting to me. I mean, you take the Dancing the Dream poem, which we read last episode, and that's kind of a spiritual connection. And you take this, and this is sort of that physical connection. Now, obviously, there's more than that. There's a lot here about his own, his soul, his heart, who he is. But I think it's important to recognize that this is a physical world he's referring to, the physical. He talks about the salt, the bitter, the sweet, passion and heat, color, fragrance, taste. I mean, he's literally speaking to the physical sensations of life. And I find it interesting that he is prefacing this entire book. Before we even open part 1, he prefaces all of this with 2 poems that explore the spiritual as well as the physical, which in a way that's kind of, I think, I'm trying to remember what exactly he said, where art is at the centerpiece of where the spiritual meets the human. And that's kind of what I feel like he's talking about in a way. So I think that's kind of cool to open this book this way. Anyway, as I said, I highly recommend you to listen to Michael's reading of Planet Earth, which is beautiful. Hopefully you still enjoy this one, but I would understand if you skipped it as well. Needless to say, I'm looking forward to diving into part 1 with you all. So please join me for our next episode when we'll be reading more from Dancing the Dream.